The divorce papers felt cold in my hands, a stark contrast to the stuffy air in the lawyer's office. The document was thick, full of legal jargon I didn't understand, but the message was clear. Leo wanted out, and he wanted out clean. My lawyer, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable, pushed her glasses up her nose. The offer is, frankly, insulting. Camila, she said, her voice flat. He keeps the majority of the savings, the new car, and offers you a pittance for alimony. In return, you assume the remaining debt on his credit cards. My phone buzzed on the polished mahogany table. Leo's name flashed on the screen. Against Mrs. Gable's disapproving glare, I answered, putting it on speaker. Camila, honey, did you get the papers? His voice was smooth, warm, the same voice that had once promised me forever. It was coated in a layer of fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. I told my guy to be generous. I just want what's best for you and Sophie. Just sign them, and we can put all this ugliness behind us. Ugliness. As if he were an innocent bystander to a car crash, not the one behind the wheel. I looked at the papers, at the numbers that spelled out my financial ruin. I thought of our daughter, sleeping in her bed, oblivious to how her father was trying to get our lives. A cold, hard clarity settled over me, pushing aside the fog of grief that had clouded my mind for a month. I'm not signing anything. Leo, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tears he was probably expecting. There was a slight pause. Camila, don't make this difficult. It's for the best. I looked at Mrs. Gable, whose lips had curved into the faintest hint of a smile. I disconnected the call without another word and slid the phone back across the table. So, Mrs. Gable said, leaning forward, what's our next move? I took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it reached my lungs in weeks. We fight, I said. We fight him for every single thing he's trying to take from us. But a month ago, I wasn't this person. A month ago, I wouldn't have known how to fight. A month ago, I was still his wife. The day it happened, the air in our apartment was thick with a silence that felt heavier than sound. Leo was packing a suitcase on our bed, the zip 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 of the pockets echoing in the tense quiet. Outside, a miserable autumn rain was falling, the gray light turning our normally cheerful bedroom into a somber, colorless space. He moved with a calm, deliberate efficiency that terrified me. He was folding his favorite blue sweater, the one I bought him for our 15th anniversary, as if he were preparing for a business trip. But he wasn't going on a business trip. Are you going to say anything? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I was leaning against the doorframe, my arms crossed tightly over my chest, a useless attempt to hold myself together. He didn't look at me. What do you want me to say? Camila, we've been over this. We hadn't been over anything. He had walked in an hour ago, announced he was leaving, and started packing. That was the extent of our conversation. No, we haven't, I said, a tremor of anger finally cutting through the shock. You haven't said anything that makes sense. You just decided. He sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I were the one being unreasonable. It's not a decision I made overnight. You have to know that. We haven't been happy for a long time. The words were a physical blow. Hadn't we been happy? I replayed the last few months in my head. The family dinners, laughing at something Sophie said. The weekend we spent fixing the garden. The way he kissed me goodbye that very morning. Was all of it a lie? The gaslighting had begun. He was rewriting our history, and I was letting him. I thought we were happy. I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. You thought, he said, finally looking at me. His eyes, the same warm brown eyes that I had fallen in love with, were cold and distant. He looked at me like I was a stranger he'd accidentally bumped into on the street. I'm doing this for you, too. You know, to set you free, so you can find someone who makes you genuinely happy. He was framing his betrayal as a gift. The audacity of it stole my breath. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to claw at that calm, placid face, but I was frozen, paralyzed by 17 years of marriage turning to dust before my eyes. And what about Sophie? I asked, my voice cracking on her name. Have you thought about her at all? Of course, he said, turning back to his suitcase. He placed a framed photo of our daughter on top of his clothes, a cruel prop in his performance. I'll always be her father. I'll call her. I'll see her. Nothing has to change for her. But everything was changing. The The foundation of her world was cracking. And he was the one holding the hammer. He zipped the main compartment of the suitcase shut. The sound was deafening. Final. I just can't do this anymore. Camila. The pretending. The going through the motions. So you're going to Myron? I said. It wasn't a question. I'd seen her name on his phone. I'd noticed the late nights at the office. I had suspected. Of course. But I had pushed those suspicions down, burying them under a mountain of denial because the alternative was unthinkable. He flinched. Just for a second. Her name is Myron. Yes. And she needs me. She needs you? I laughed. A bitter, broken sound. I need you. Leo. Your daughter needs you. We've built a life here. We have a mortgage. We have bills. We have history. Myron's pregnant, he said. The words dropped into the silence like stones into a still pond. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I gripped the doorframe to stay upright. Pregnant. A baby. A new family. A replacement for us. The word echoed in my skull, drowning out everything else. My mind went blank. The shock was so profound. It was almost peaceful. A quiet, white noise that shielded me from the full force of the pain. He saw the look on my face and had the decency to look away. We're moving into her place for now. He continued, his voice softer, as if that would somehow lessen the blow. It's just temporary. Until we find something bigger. He was already planning a future. A bigger place for his new family. And I was standing here, in the wreckage of our past. He walked past me, pulling the suitcase behind him. The little wheels made a soft rumbling sound on the hardwood floor. He didn't touch me. He didn't even look at me again. At the front door, he paused to put on his jacket. Leave the keys. Leo, I said. My voice was surprisingly firm. A small island of strength in an ocean of pain. He hesitated for a moment, then pulled the keychain from his pocket. It was a silver horseshoe I'd given him for good luck when we first bought the apartment. He placed it gently on the small entryway table. Then, without a backward glance, he opened the door and walked out. The lock clicked shut, and I was alone. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the closed door. Minutes, an hour. The rain lashed against the windows. The only sound in the apartment. My world, so solid just that morning, had dissolved into nothing. The next day, the fog of shock began to lift, replaced by a cold, terrifying reality. I was sorting through a pile of mail on the kitchen table, mostly junk. A few bills when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something told me to answer. Hello. May I speak with Camila Parker? A cheerful, professional voice asked. This is she. Hi, Camila. This is Sarah from Maple Creek Community Bank. I'm just calling with a friendly reminder about your mortgage payment. It's now 5 days overdue. I froze. The phone pressed against my ear. I'm sorry. There must be a mistake, I said, my heart starting to pound. My husband, Leo, he handles the mortgage. He told me he made the payment last week. It was one of the last normal conversations we'd had. He'd been on his laptop, and I'd asked if he paid it. All taken care of. He'd said without looking up. I'm looking at the account right now. Ma'am, Sarah said, her tone still cheerful but now with an edge of automated insistence. The payment for this month has not been processed. We'll have to add a late fee if it isn't paid by the end of the week. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. It wasn't a mistake. It was a lie. He hadn't paid it. He had known he was leaving. He had looked me in the eye and lied, letting the bill slide, knowing the mess would land squarely in my lap. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The deep, aching grief was still there, but a new feeling began to surface alongside it. It was cold and sharp and dangerous. It was rage. He hadn't just left me. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had deliberately, methodically, started to dismantle my life even before he walked out the door. This wasn't just an affair. It was an act of war. And I had just received the first casualty report. I paid the mortgage online, my fingers moving stiffly over the keyboard. The late fee was an extra $75, a small but deliberate stab. As the confirmation page loaded, the tears I had been holding back simply refused to come. Instead, a different kind of energy began to simmer in my veins. It was a cold, quiet fury. He had planned this. He had left me financially vulnerable on purpose, likely assuming I'd be too consumed by grief to notice until it was too late. He wanted me to panic. He wanted me to fall apart. The sound of the front door opening and closing snapped me out of my trance. Sophie. I quickly closed the laptop, not wanting her to see the banking website. I needed to tell her what happened, but I had to find the right words. How do you tell a 10-year-old that her father, her hero, has not only left her but has also orchestrated a quiet campaign of cruelty against her mother? She stomped into the kitchen, her cheeks flushed from the autumn chill, and dropped her heavy backpack onto the floor. She was carrying her piano book. Hey, sweetheart, how was school? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She didn't answer. She went straight to the fridge, pulled out a juice box, and stabbed the straw into it with unnecessary force. Sophie. She turned around. Her eyes narrowed. They were Leo's eyes. And right now, they were looking at me with an accusation that made my stomach clench. Where's Dad? She asked, her voice flat. I took a breath. Sophie. Honey. We need to talk. Your father. He's gone to live somewhere else for a while. For a while? She repeated, her voice dripping with a sarcasm that was far too old for her ears. Or forever. The directness of the question caught me off guard. I don't know yet. Honey. It's complicated. No. It's not. She snapped, her small body rigid with anger. You made him leave. I heard you. You were always yelling at him about money and working late. You were never happy with him. The accusation hit me harder than Leo's betrayal. It was his words coming out of her mouth. He had been planting these seeds for months, complaining to her in quiet moments, positioning himself as a victim of his demanding, ungrateful wife. And I, in my exhaustion, had never noticed. That's not true. Sophie. I said, my voice trembling. Married people argue sometimes. It doesn't mean they don't love each other. Your father made his own choice. He promised he'd take me to the arcade this weekend. She said, her lower lip starting to tremble. The anger was just a shield for the hurt underneath. He promised. I know. Baby. I'm so sorry. I reached for her, but she flinched away from my touch as if I were fire. Don't. She cried, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. You're the one who ruined everything. I hate you. She ran from the kitchen. And a moment later, her bedroom door slammed shut with a force that seemed to shake the entire apartment. I stood alone in the silence, the sound of her sobs echoing faintly down the hall. This was his parting gift. He hadn't just left me. He had turned my own daughter against me. I felt utterly, completely alone. The doorbell rang, startling me. For a wild, foolish second, I thought it was Leo. That he had come back. That it was all a horrible nightmare. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw the familiar, curly white hair of my neighbor, Carmen. I opened the door, and she took one look at my face and marched straight into my apartment, holding a large casserole dish. I'm not asking. I'm telling, she announced, heading for the kitchen. You're going to eat. I made my lasagna. It can cure anything from a common cold to a broken heart. Carmen was a force of nature, a 70-year-old widow who had lived in the building for 30 years and knew everything about everyone. She set the lasagna on the counter and then turned to me, her sharp, intelligent eyes scanning my face. So, the good-for-nothing finally did it. Ha, she said, her voice softer now. I saw him leave with a suitcase. I almost threw a flower pot at his car. But my begonias are looking too good this year to waste on him. A weak smile touched my lips. It's that obvious? Honey. A blind man could see the trouble in that marriage for the last 6 months. The way he'd look at his phone when he thought you weren't watching. The slick new haircut. The sudden interest in the gym. It's a classic midlife crisis cliché. That man has the backbone of a chocolate eclair. She patted my arm. You're better off without him. It hurts like hell now. But you are. Just having someone on my side. Someone who saw the truth. Felt like a lifeline. I told her everything the other woman. The pregnancy. The unpaid mortgage. With each detail, her expression grew darker. That's not just a cliché. That's a villain. She declared, shaking her head. And leaving you with the debts? That's just plain evil. My first husband, rest his soul, was a gambler. Left me with nothing but a pile of betting slips. I learned one thing, you don't grieve. You get a lawyer. A shark. A piranha. Someone who will strip him down to his designer underwear. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang again. This time, it was my mother, Eleanor. She walked in like a storm, her coat still damp from the rain. Her face set in a grim, determined line. She had never liked Leo. From day one. She had said he was too smooth to be trusted. She had been right all along. She hugged me tightly. A rare show of physical affection. I came as soon as I could. She said, her voice low and fierce. I called your cell. You didn't answer. She looked past me at Carmen, giving a curt nod. Carmen. Eleanor. Carmen replied, equally brisk. The two of them were like two opposing generals, united by a common enemy. My mother took off her coat and got straight to the point. What's the plan? Have you frozen the joint accounts? Have you called a lawyer? Have you changed the locks? I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. Mom, he just left yesterday. I haven't even. Yesterday was a day too late. She cut me off, her tone sharp but not unkind. Camila, you need to understand something. This is not a man suffering from a broken heart. This is a man executing a plan. He has been planning his exit for months. Every dollar he spent, every document he signed, he did it with this moment in mind. He is not your husband anymore. He's your adversary. Her words were harsh, but they resonated with the cold anger that was solidifying inside me. She was right. This was a battle, not a breakup. Sophie hates me, I said, the words catching in my throat. She blames me for everything. Of course she does, my mother said, her eyes softening for a moment. He's been poisoning her against you. It's the oldest trick in the manipulator's handbook. Make the other person the villain so you can play the hero. As if on cue, my cell phone, sitting on the counter, lit up. It was a video call from Leo, but the request was for Sophie's tablet, which was linked to my account. Before I could decline, a notification popped up showing that the call had been answered in her room. He was calling her directly. My mother and I looked at each other. Without a word, we crept down the hall and stood outside Sophie's closed door. We could hear her excited voice, followed by his, smooth and reassuring. Hey, my little champ, Leo was saying. How's my best girl? Daddy, I miss you. When are you coming home? Sophie's voice was small and hopeful. Soon. Sweetheart, I promise. I miss you more than anything. Listen, I know things are weird right now. Mom is just going through a lot, and she's very sad and a little angry. So you have to be extra good for her. Okay? Don't give her a hard time. He was painting me as emotionally unstable, a problem to be managed. But she made you leave, Sophie insisted. There was a pause, a perfectly calculated moment of feigned reluctance. It's more complicated than that, sweetie. We just weren't making each other happy anymore. But that has nothing to do with you and me. You and I are forever. I'll come get you for that arcade trip this weekend, just like I promised. We'll get the giant pizza and win all the prizes. Really? For real? For real. I love you. Sophie Bear. I love you too. Daddy. The call ended. I leaned against the wall, feeling sick. He was dangling promises he likely had no intention of keeping, buying her loyalty with lies while framing me as a cause of all her pain. I pushed the door open gently. Sophie was sitting on her bed, clutching her tablet, a huge, happy smile on her face. The smile vanished the second she saw me. Her expression turned hard and resentful again. I walked back to the kitchen, my mother following behind me. Carmen was quietly slicing the lasagna, giving us space. You see, my mother said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. He's not just your adversary. Camila, he's using your daughter as a weapon against you. Don't you dare let him win. The weekend came and went. Leo never showed up for the arcade trip. He didn't even call. Sophie spent all of Saturday sitting by the window, her backpack packed with her favorite stuffed animal and a book, waiting. By evening, her hopeful silence had curdled into a sullen, heartbreaking disappointment. She refused to eat dinner and wouldn't speak to me. When I tried to comfort her, she pushed me away, muttering, "It's your fault he didn't come. You probably told him not to." The lie was so cruel, so needlessly damaging. He could have just called, a simple text message. But he chose silence, letting her imagination fill in the blanks, knowing she would direct her anger at the most convenient target, me. I was beginning to understand the calculated nature of his cruelty. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about burning every bridge and salting the earth behind him. The following week, I met with Mrs. Gable. I told her about the mortgage, The lies to Sophie. The feeling that I was being systematically dismantled. She listened patiently, her fingers steepled under her chin. He's using classic gaslighting and alienation tactics, she said, her voice sharp. The goal is to destabilize you emotionally, make you seem irrational. When it comes time to negotiate, he'll paint you as the hysterical ex-wife, and himself as the calm, reasonable father. It's a strategy, and a nasty one. So what do I do? I asked, feeling a fresh wave of helplessness. You document everything, she said, sliding a notepad across the desk to me. Every missed call, every broken promise to your daughter, every financial mistake you uncover. Dates, times, details. We build a record, a pattern of behavior. In court, a pattern is more powerful than a single event. And you, Camila, you stop being a victim. You start gathering intelligence. Gathering intelligence. The phrase echoed in my mind as I drove home. It sounded so clandestine, so strategic. It sounded like something a strong person would do. I wasn't sure I was that person yet, but the idea planted a seed of resolve in me. My chance came 2 days later. A delivery truck pulled up outside our building, and 2 men carried a large, flat-packed box toward the entrance. A new bookshelf for Sophie's room. I had ordered it weeks ago. Before my world imploded, they needed to bring it up in the service elevator, which required a key. And the key was on Leo's old set of spares, which he kept in the back of his home office closet. The office was the one room I had avoided. It was still exactly as he had left it, papers stacked neatly on the desk, a coffee mug with a dried ring at the bottom, the faint scent of his cologne hanging in the air. It felt like a ghost room. Taking a deep breath, I walked in and opened the closet. His old gym bag was there, a pair of worn-out sneakers, and, on a hook, the spare keys. As I grabbed them, my fingers brushed against the cool metal of his old laptop. It was a dinosaur, one he hadn't used for work in years, but he kept it for personal files and photos. He had been so meticulous about taking his work computer, his new tablet, everything of value. Why had he left this behind? An impulse, sharp and sudden, shot through me. Gathering intelligence. After letting the delivery men in, I took the laptop to the kitchen table. I felt a pang of guilt, a feeling of trespassing. This was a line I had never crossed in 17 years of marriage. But as my mother had said, he wasn't my husband anymore. He was my adversary. I opened the lid. The screen flickered to life, asking for a password. My heart sank. Of course, it was password protected. I tried the obvious ones first. Sophie's birthday, our anniversary, password 1 to 3. Nothing worked. I was about to give up when I remembered a conversation from years ago. He was setting a password for a new bank account and was laughing about his system. Always use the name of your first love. He joked. No one ever guesses it. He had told me his first crush was a girl from his childhood named Sazik. It was a silly, intimate detail from a life that no longer felt real. My fingers trembled as I typed it in, SUSIQ. The screen blinked and opened to the desktop. I was in. For a moment, I just stared, my heart hammering against my ribs. What was I even looking for? I started with the most obvious place, the email client. His old account was still logged in. The inbox was mostly spam and old newsletters. I was about to close it when I saw a folder labeled personal. My breath hitched. I clicked it. It was all there. A digital timeline of his betrayal. Emails from Myron going back almost a year. The first ones were flirty, professional. Then they became more intimate, filled with secret jokes and plans for clandestine meetings. They talked about me. C's working a double shift tonight. One of his emails read, my place? Another. From her, I can't believe how oblivious she is. Don't you feel bad? Leo's reply, it's complicated. I'm just trying to find the right time to end things without hurting her too much. Hurting me too much. The hypocrisy was nauseating. He had been ending things for a year while still sleeping in my bed. Still letting me plan our family vacations. Still kissing me goodbye every morning. Then I found the emails about the apartment. They had been looking for a place together for months. There were links to real estate listings, discussions about mortgages, arguments about decor. One email from Myron, dated 2 months before he left. Read, Leo. We need to make a decision on the condo. The seller won't wait forever. You promised you'd have the down payment ready after the Jubilee bonus came through. The Jubilee bonus. Jubilee. The name rang a bell. It was a massive residential project his construction company was handling. He had been working insane hours on it, complaining about the stress. It'll all be worth it when that bonus hits, he'd said. I had thought that bonus was for us. For a new car. Or a trip to Disney World for Sophie. But it was never for us. It was for his escape. My hands were shaking now. A mixture of rage and a strange, vindicating sense of clarity. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the hysterical, irrational woman he was trying to paint me as. My instincts had been screaming at me for months, and I had silenced them. No more. Driven by a new, cold purpose, I began to look through his documents folder. It was mostly old resumes and tax returns. But then I saw a folder simply labeled Jubilee. Inside were dozens of spreadsheets and PDF files. Most of them were technical documents I didn't understand: blueprints, supply chain logistics, zoning permits. But one file name caught my eye: Jubilee_budget_internal_V3. I opened it. It was a massive spreadsheet, listing costs for everything from lumber to labor. The numbers were staggering. Millions of dollars. As I scrolled through it, another file name stood out: Jubilee_budget_client_V4. Curious. I opened it in a separate window. It looked almost identical. Same line items. Same formatting. But as I compared the two, I noticed something deeply disturbing. The numbers were different. On the client version, the cost for site preparation was listed as $1. 10 million. On the internal version, the same line item was only $800. 0. Raw materials, concrete was $3. 5 million for the client, but only $2. 8 million internally. Every single line item was inflated on the client-facing budget. The difference was in the millions. I wasn't an accountant, but I knew what I was looking at. This was fraud. This wasn't just a midlife crisis affair. This was criminal. The Jubilee bonus he was counting on probably wasn't a bonus at all. It was his cut of the skimmed money. I felt a dizzying mix of terror and power. This changed everything. This wasn't just a messy divorce anymore. I was holding a bomb. The question was, what was I going to do with it? My first thought was Mrs. Gable. I needed to show her this. This was the leverage we needed. This was the pattern of behavior she was talking about. A pattern of deceit that ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. I found an old USB drive in the kitchen junk drawer and began copying the Felesta mails, the apartment listings, and both versions of the Jubilee budget. As the progress bar slowly filled, I felt a sense of control for the first time in weeks. He thought he had left me with nothing. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had left behind the truth. With the USB drive clutched in my hand, I felt like I was holding a key to my freedom, to justice, to protecting Sophie's future. My mind raced with the possibilities. This was more than enough to guarantee a favorable divorce settlement. It was enough to make Leo understand that he couldn't just walk away, leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. For the first time, I felt like I had a shield. My plan was simple: call Mrs. Gable first thing in the morning, schedule an emergency meeting, and let her decide the best way to deploy this new arsenal. I wouldn't tell Leo the first had it. The element of surprise was my only advantage. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. I went to check on Sophie before bed. Her light was still on, and I pushed the door open a crack. She was sitting at her small desk, not doing her homework, but staring intently at the screen of Leo's old laptop. My blood ran cold. "Sophie, what are you doing with that?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She jumped, startled, and quickly tried to close the laptop. But it was too late. I saw the familiar layout of the email program on the screen. "Nothing," she said, her voice small and defensive. "Just looking at old pictures." I walked over to her desk. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "Sophie, tell me the truth. What were you doing?" She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at her hands, which were twisting a loose thread on her pajamas. "I know the password," she whispered, as if confessing a terrible crime. "Daddy told me it once. He said it was a secret." But I remembered. Sazik. The name, once a source of silly nostalgia, now sounded sinister. He had given his 10-year-old daughter the key to unlock all his secrets. The carelessness of it was staggering. "What did you look at, honey?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, trying not to let the panic seeping into my veins show. Her eyes welled up with tears. "I saw them," she said, her voice breaking. "The emails. From her. Myron. They were buying a house. They had names for the baby. My stomach dropped. I hadn't even gotten that far. Names for the baby. The lie had been even more elaborate than I'd realized. He had built a whole fantasy life with Myron. A life that was a mirror image of the one he was destroying with us. He lied to me. Sophie sobbed, the words tumbling out now. He said he was sad to leave. He said he missed me. But he was happy. He was planning a new family. He never loved us at all. Oh, baby. That's not true, I said, pulling her into a hug. She didn't resist this time. She buried her face in my shoulder and cried. Deep, wrenching sobs of a child whose world had been shattered by the one person she was supposed to trust implicitly. I held her until the tears subsided, stroking her hair, murmuring empty comforts. When she finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and swollen. But her expression had changed. The grief was still there, but underneath it was a hard, cold anger that looked chillingly familiar. It was the same anger I had been feeling all day. So I did something, she said, her voice eerily calm. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. What did you do, Sophie? She turned back to the laptop and moved the mouse. She pulled out the sent folder in the email program. There was one email, sent an hour ago. The recipient was a name I recognized from the work documents. See? Fresno at Invercorp. Come. Celso Fresno. Leo's boss. The head of the entire company. The subject line read, something you need to see about Leo Parker. My hand flew to my mouth. Sophie. No. I sent him everything, she said, her voice flat, emotionless. The budgets. The ones with the different numbers. I saw them. It looked like Daddy was cheating. Her gaze flickered to me. That's what he was doing, right? Cheating the company? I couldn't speak. I just stared at the screen, at the damning evidence of what my daughter had done. She had taken my carefully constructed plan, my strategic arsenal, and launched a nuclear missile. And she wasn't finished. She had not only attached the files, but she had also written a message. It was written in the simple, direct language of a child, which made it all the more devastating. Dear Mr. Fresno. It read, I found this on my dad's computer. I think he is stealing money from you. The numbers don't match. He told my mom he was getting a big bonus from the Jubilee project, but I think he was just taking it. He left us last month for another lady. He said she was having a baby, and he promised he would still see me. But he lied. He's using the money he stole to buy a new apartment with her. My mom cries all the time now. He's a liar and a thief. You should fire him. A person who knows. I sank onto the edge of her bed, the strength draining out of my legs. This was so much worse than I could have imagined. This wasn't an anonymous tip. It was personal. It was vengeful. It painted a complete, damning picture of Leo not just as a fraudulent employee, but as a terrible human being. Sophie, why would you do that? I whispered, the words feeling inadequate for the scale of the catastrophe. Because he hurt you, she said, looking at me with an intensity that startled me. Her eyes were fierce. He hurts you every day. He makes you sad. And he made me sad. And he lied. You always say we should never lie. He deserved it. He deserved to be punished. I looked at my daughter. This small, 10-year-old girl who had just declared war on her own father. And I saw a reflection of myself. I saw my own anger. My own desire for justice. Amplified and acted upon with the reckless abandon of a child who doesn't yet understand consequences. She had done what I was too afraid to do. I had wanted to use the information as a bargaining chip in a divorce. She had used it as a weapon to burn his entire life to the ground. Honey, I said, my voice shaking. This is very, very serious. This could get Daddy into a lot of trouble. More than just losing his job. Good, she said, her jaw set. He deserves it. I didn't know what to do. Should I try to recall the mail? Was that even possible? Should I call Leo and warn him? The thought of helping him after what he'd done was repulsive. But the alternative of watching him face a criminal investigation, knowing my daughter was the one who lit the fuse, was terrifying. My phone started ringing, the sound shrill and jarring in the quiet room. I looked at the caller ID. It was an unknown number, but the area code was local. A cold dread washed over me. It was too soon for it to be Leo's boss, wasn't it? I answered, my hand trembling. Hello, am I speaking with Camila Parker? A man's voice asked. It was calm, professional, and utterly chilling. Yes, this is she. Mrs. Parker, my name is Celso Fresno. I'm the director at Invercorp. I apologize for the late hour, but I just received a rather disturbing email concerning your husband. I need to speak with him immediately. It's a matter of extreme urgency. Celso Fresno's voice was a calm, steady hum on the other end of the line. But underneath it, I could hear the unmistakable rumble of an approaching storm. Mrs. Parker, are you there? I took a shaky breath, my eyes still fixed on Sophie, who was watching me with a mixture of fear and defiance. I'm here, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But Leo doesn't live here anymore. We're separated. There was a pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the pieces of the anonymous email clicking into place. I see, he said, his tone shifting from professional concern to something colder, more serious. The email mentioned that. Do you have a contact number where I can reach him? I have his cell number, I said, my mind racing. Should I give it to him? Was I protecting Leo by withholding it? Or was I just delaying the inevitable? I was implicated now, a bystander at the scene of the crime my daughter had reported. Please, Mr. Fresno said, his voice leaving no room for argument. I recited the number, my voice robotic. Thank you, Mrs. Parker. I apologize again for the intrusion. We will be launching an internal investigation into this matter immediately. He hung up. The finality of his words hung in the air. An internal investigation. It was real. It was happening. I looked at Sophie. Her bravado had melted away, replaced by a dawning understanding of what she had done. Is Daddy going to jail? She asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, honey, I said honestly, pulling her into another hug. I really don't know. I didn't know what to say. How could I possibly reprimand her for acting out of a fierce, misguided love for me? She had seen me suffering, and she had tried to make it stop. I put her to bed, assuring her that we would face whatever came next together. But as I walked back into the living room, my own composure crumbled. I sank onto the sofa, my head in my hands. What had she unleashed? And what would Leo do when he found out? I didn't have to wait long. An hour later, just as I was drifting into a restless sleep on the couch, there was a loud, frantic banging on the front door. It wasn't a knock. It was a desperate, angry pounding that echoed through the apartment. My heart leaped into my throat. I knew, with absolute certainty, who it was. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. Leo stood on the other side, his face pale and contorted with a rage I had never seen before. He looked like a cornered animal. Camila, open this door. I know you're in there, he roared, his voice muffled but full of venom. I backed away from the door, my mind screaming. Sophie was sleeping. I couldn't let him wake her. I couldn't let her see him like this. Leo, go away, I yelled back, my voice shaking. You'll wake Sophie. I don't care about Sophie right now. I care about the fact that you just destroyed my life. Open the damn door, or I'll break it down. He wasn't bluffing. I could hear the wood of the door frame groaning as he threw his shoulder against it. Panic seized me. I had to get him inside, away from the hallway where neighbors could hear. I fumbled with the locks and opened the door just enough to let him stumble in, then slammed and locked it behind him. He stood in the entryway, breathing heavily, his eyes wild. He was no longer the calm, manipulative man who had left a month ago. The mask was gone. This was a real Leo, raw and desperate. What did you do? He hissed, advancing on me. I instinctively took a step back. What the hell did you do? Camila, I didn't do anything, I said, holding my hands up. I swear. Leo, don't lie to me, he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at my face. Celso Fresno called me. He read me the email. An email about my personal life, about Myron, about our baby. Information that only you could know. You sent it, didn't you? You couldn't stand to see me happy. So you decided to ruin me. The sheer, unadulterated narcissism of his accusation was breathtaking. Even now, with his world collapsing around him, he still saw himself as a victim. He saw my pain not as a consequence of his actions, but as a motive for revenge. A strange calm washed over me. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by a sudden, clarifying anger. My mother's words echoed in my head. He's your adversary. Happy? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You call this happy? Leaving your family in debt, lying to your daughter, Destroying 17 years of marriage? And you have the nerve to stand in my house and accuse me of ruining your life? He was taken aback by my tone. He had expected tears, denials, fear. He hadn't expected a fight. You sent him the files. Camila. The budgets. How could you? He pleaded, his anger suddenly shifting to a desperate, theatrical display of woundedness. That was my career. My future. It wasn't me. Leo. I said. And I decided, in that split second, to tell him the truth. Let him see the full scope of the damage he had caused. It was Sophie. He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. For a moment, he didn't seem to process the words. What? Sophie? I repeated, my voice as cold and hard as steel. Your daughter. The one you abandoned. She found your laptop. She found the emails to your pregnant girlfriend. She found the budgets you were using to steal from your company. And she sent them to your boss because she wanted to punish you for what you did to us. To me. To her. The color drained from his face. The rage. The bluster. All of it evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, stunned silence. He stumbled backward and sank onto the arm of the sofa, his head in his hands. No. He whispered. No. She wouldn't. She did. I said, pressing my advantage. She saw every lie. Leo. She read how you were planning your new life, while you were still tucking her into bed at night. What did you expect? He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying, self-pitying despair. My life is over. He moaned. Celso fired me. He said if I don't pay the money back, he's going to the police. The money. Camila, it's gone. I know where it went. I said coldly. A down payment on a condo for you and your new family. He let out a choked, desperate sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. Family. He spat. There's no family. There's no baby. I frowned. What are you talking about? You said she was pregnant. He looked up, and the expression on his face was one of utter, pathetic defeat. She lied. Camila. There was never a baby. She told me she was pregnant to get me to leave you. Then, a few weeks later, she said she'd had a miscarriage. It was all a lie to get me to commit, to get me to buy the apartment with her. He shook his head slowly. And tonight, when I told her I'd been fired, that the money was gone, she packed a bag and left. She said she couldn't be with a failure. The final, pathetic piece of his fantasy life had crumbled to dust. He had torched his family, his career, his reputation, all for a woman who had played him for a fool. For a second, I almost felt a flicker of pity for him. He was a pathetic, broken man. But then I remembered Sophie, sobbing in her room. I remembered the overdue mortgage notice. I remembered the years of lies. So you have nothing, I stated, my voice flat. He looked up at me, his eyes swimming with tears. And then, he did the one thing I never expected. He slid off the arm of the sofa and onto his knees in front of me. Camila, please, he begged, reaching for my hands. I snatched them away. I was a fool, an idiot. I see that now. I threw away the only thing that ever mattered. You, Sophie, our family. Please, you have to help me. We can fix this. I can come home. I'll do anything. I love you. Camila, I've always loved you. The words were hollow, meaningless. They were the last desperate gamble of a man with no cards left to play. He wasn't begging for me. He was begging for a lifeline, a roof over his head, an ally in the storm he had created. I looked down at him, this stranger kneeling on my floor, and I felt nothing. No love, no pity, not even hatred. Just a vast, empty space where my heart used to be. Get up, Leo, I said, my voice empty of all emotion. Camila, please, get up. He slowly, shakily, got to his feet. He looked at me, his face pleading, searching for a sign of the woman he had married, the woman who had always forgiven him. But she was gone. He had killed her. I walked to the entryway table and picked up my phone. What are you doing? He asked, his voice filled with a new, dawning horror. I dialed 911. Hello, I said, my voice intentionally loud, shaking with manufactured fear. I need the police. My ex-husband broke into my apartment. He's threatening me. I'm scared. My daughter is sleeping in the next room. Please, send someone quickly. Leo's eyes widened in disbelief. Camila. No. What are you doing? I held his gaze. My own eyes cold and unflinching. I'm gathering intelligence, I said softly. Then I turned away from him and continued my performance for the dispatcher. Yes. He's still here. He's yelling at me. Please hurry. The flashing blue and red lights painted strobing patterns across our living room walls. Two police officers stood in the entryway, their expressions grim and professional. One was speaking to me in low, calming tones, while the other was escorting a handcuffed, utterly bewildered Leo out the door. He didn't break in. Leo kept repeating, his voice a mixture of panic and disbelief. She let me in. This is my home. Camila. Tell them you're lying. I just stood there, wrapped in a blanket an officer had given me, and watched him. I didn't say a word. I just let his desperate denials hang in the air. A stark contrast to my carefully constructed performance of a terrified woman. The officer taking my statement, a kind-faced man named Peterson, gave me a sympathetic look. We'll take him downtown for the night. Ma'am, he said. He'll be charged with trespassing and harassment. We'll issue a temporary restraining order. You and your daughter will be safe. Safe? It was a word I hadn't felt in a long time. As they led Leo away, he turned to look at me one last time. His eyes were no longer filled with rage or desperation, but with a cold, dawning realization. He finally understood. I was no longer a pawn in his game. I had become a player, and I had just checkmated him. After the police left, the apartment was eerily quiet. The adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins began to fade, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I went to check on Sophie. Miraculously, she had slept through the entire ordeal. She was curled up under her covers, her face peaceful. I stood in her doorway, watching her breathe, and a wave of fierce, protective love washed over me. Everything I had just done, every lie I had told to the police, was for her. It was to build a wall around our lives that Leo could never breach again. The next morning, Leo's counterattack began. My phone rang at 8 a.m. It was Mrs. Gable. Camila, she said, her voice urgent. I just got off the phone with Leo's new lawyer, a real shark named Marcus Thorne. He's claiming you fabricated the entire break-in to gain leverage in the divorce. Of course he is, I said, a weary resignation settling over me. It gets worse, she continued. He's filing a motion to have you psychologically evaluated. He's going to argue that you're an unstable, vindictive woman who is manipulating your daughter and concocting elaborate schemes to ruin a good man's life. He's painting last night not as an act of self-preservation, but as proof of your instability. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. He was taking my strength and twisting it into a weapon against me. He was going to use the very tactics he had taught me to fear and turn them on me in a public forum. What do we do? I asked, my voice small. We get ahead of it, Mrs. Gable said, her voice all business. We file for an emergency custody hearing. We use the police report, the temporary restraining order, and we use the evidence from the laptop. But Camila, you need to be prepared. This is going to get ugly. He's not just fighting for assets anymore. He's fighting to destroy your credibility. The battle had moved to a new front. It wasn't just in our home anymore. It was in the courtroom. And worse, in the court of public opinion. Maple Creek was a small town. Gossip traveled faster than the local news. By the time I dropped Sophie off at school, I could already feel the whispers, the curious glances from other mothers, the hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked by. Leo, or his lawyer, had been busy. The narrative was already taking hold. Camila Parker, the scorned wife, had finally snapped. My mother called me midday, her voice tight with fury. Patricia from the book club called me. She fumed. She asked if you were doing all right. She said she heard there was some domestic trouble. I told her the only trouble was that my daughter was finally taking out the trash. They're trying to make me look crazy. Mom, I said, the weight of it all pressing down on me. Then don't act crazy, she said, her tone practical as always. Act smart. Act strong. Let him sling his mud. You just keep building your case with bricks of truth. His lies will fall apart, but his lies were powerful. That evening, I was served with papers, a formal request for a psychological evaluation, and a motion for Leo to be granted supervised visitation with Sophie. Pending the results of my evaluation, the implication was clear. I was a danger to my own child. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the legal documents, and for the first time since Leo left, I felt a flicker of real despair. How could I fight this? It was my word against his. He was a charismatic, successful man. I was just a nurse, a woman he had spent years quietly isolating and undermining. Just as I was about to give in to the hopelessness, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Is this Camila Parker? This is Myron. I think we need to talk. I know what Leo is doing, and I might be able to help. I stared at the message, my mind reeling. Myron. The cause of all this pain. Why on earth would she want to help me? Was this another one of Leo's tricks? A trap? I almost deleted the message. But then, a thought surfaced. What did I have to lose? My reputation was already being dragged through the mud. My adversary was using every weapon at his disposal. Maybe it was time I found an unexpected ally. I agreed to meet her at a small, anonymous coffee shop on the outskirts of town the next day. I chose a booth in the back. My nerves frayed. She arrived a few minutes later, looking nothing like the confident, glamorous woman I had imagined. She was pale. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she was wearing a simple sweater and jeans. She looked young, lost, and just as broken as I had felt a month ago. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding into the booth. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Why are you here, Myron? I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She took a shaky breath. Because he's doing the same thing to me, she said, her voice low. He's been calling me, texting me. At first, he was begging me to come back. Then, when I refused, he got him into it. He's trying to make me a scapegoat. I listened, a cold knot of understanding forming in my stomach. Of course, Leo never took responsibility. He always needed someone else to blame. First me, now her. He told me about what you did, Myron continued, finally looking up at me. Her eyes were filled with a strange mix of fear and admiration. Calling the police, getting the restraining order. He's terrified of you. That's why he's fighting so dirty. What do you want from me? I asked. I don't want anything, she said. I want to give you something. She reached into her large purse and pulled out her phone. She fumbled with it for a moment, then slid it across the table to me. He left voicemails. Before he started threatening me, he was still trying to win me back. He was bragging. She pressed play on a recording, and there it was. Leo's voice, smooth and arrogant, filled the quiet coffee shop. Babe, it's me. Listen. Don't worry about the money. The Jubilee thing is a masterpiece. I've been running this system for years. A little cream off the top of every big project. Salsa is too stupid to ever notice. That bonus I told you about, it's just the beginning. You and me. We're going to have everything. Just trust me. There were 3 more messages, all in the same vein. Detailed, arrogant confessions of his crimes, all wrapped up in his pathetic attempts to impress her. It was a smoking gun. It was irrefutable proof, in his own voice, that he was not only guilty but a habitual offender. And he had no idea she had it. Why are you giving this to me? I asked, my voice hoarse. This could protect you, she said, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. I lost my job. My reputation is ruined. I was a fool. I believed his lies. Just like you did. He used both of us. But he's not going to get away with it. Not if I can help it. She looked at me, her gaze steady. He thinks women are weak. Camila. He thinks he can play us against each other. Let's prove him wrong. I looked down at the phone. At the evidence that could end this entire nightmare. It was the ultimate irony. The woman who had helped destroy my family was now offering me the one thing that could save it. I walked into Mrs. Gable's office the next morning with a newfound sense of purpose. The despair that had been gnawing at me was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I placed Myron's phone on the polished desk. I think you'll want to hear this, I said, as the voicemails played. I watched Mrs. Gable's expression shift from professional stoicism to a slow, predatory smile. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. When the last recording finished, she looked up at me, her eyes gleaming. Well, Camila, she said, her voice laced with triumph. I believe the term for this is a game changer. She was right. The voicemails changed everything. They were the irrefutable truth, delivered in Leo's own arrogant voice. Armed with this new evidence, Mrs. Gable went on the offensive. She filed a motion to have Leo's claims of my instability dismissed, submitting the recordings as evidence of his manipulative character and criminal activity. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for Leo. His lawyer, Marcus Thorne, who had been so aggressive and condescending, suddenly in town began to change. The narrative of the crazy ex-wife was quickly replaced by the story of a cunning con man and the two women he had wronged. We were no longer rivals. In the eyes of the community, evaluation was dropped. His request for visitation was denied pending the outcome of the criminal investigation, which, thanks to his own confessions, was moving forward with terrifying speed. He was cornered, with no lies left to tell and no one left to blame. The divorce proceedings, which he had intended to drag out for months, were settled in a matter of weeks. He agreed to all of my terms. I got the house, full custody of Sophie, and a significant portion of his remaining legitimate assets as restitution. He signed the papers without a fight. He had no other choice. It was a quiet, anticlimactic end to a war that had been so loud and brutal. A few weeks later, Leo was formally charged with multiple counts of fraud. The trial was short, with his own words convicting him. There was little his lawyer could do. He was sentenced to 5 years in a minimum security prison. I didn't go to the courthouse to hear the verdict. I didn't need to. His fate no longer felt connected to mine. My mother went, though. She called me from the courthouse steps. "It's done," she said, her voice filled with a grim satisfaction. He didn't even look at me. That evening, I sat with Sophie on the living room floor, sorting through a box of old photographs. It was my attempt to reclaim our history, to separate the good memories from the shadow of Leo's betrayal. We found a picture of Sophie as a toddler, covered in mud, laughing hysterically. "I remember that day," she said, a small smile on her face. "Daddy hosed me off in the front yard before you got home from work." "He did," I said, my voice soft. "He could be a good father sometimes, couldn't he?" It was important, I thought, for her to remember that, to know that not everything had been a lie. The man who had hurt us so deeply was the same man who had once pushed her on the swings and taught her how to ride a bike. People were complicated. Love was complicated. And forgiveness, I was learning, was the most complicated thing of all. "Mom," she asked, looking up from the photo, "are you okay?" I looked at her. My smart, brave, resilient daughter. The one who had started all of this with a single, vengeful act of love. "I am now, honey," I said. And for the first time in a very long time, I knew it was the absolute truth. We're both okay. 1 year later, the world looked different, brighter. The house that had once felt like a prison of bad memories now felt like a sanctuary. I had painted the walls, bought new furniture, and filled the rooms with flowers and sunlight. I had reclaimed the space as my own. My work at the clinic was thriving. After the story of my legal battle became public, I was surprised by the outpouring of support. Patients, colleagues, even strangers offered words of encouragement. My boss, impressed by my resilience, promoted me to head of patient services, a position with more responsibility and better pay. And then there was Dr. Evans, Michael. He was a pediatrician at the clinic, a kind, quiet man with warm eyes and a gentle smile. He was a widower with a daughter a year older than Sophie. He had watched my ordeal from a distance, and when the dust settled, he asked me out for coffee. That coffee turned into dinner, and that dinner turned into a slow, steady, and beautifully ordinary relationship. His daughter, Chloe, and Sophie became fast friends. Their bond forged over a shared love of pizza and video games. One crisp autumn afternoon, exactly a year after Leo had been sentenced, the four of us were at a local park. The girls were running ahead, their laughter carrying on the wind. Michael reached over and took my hand. His was warm and steady. "You seem happy, Camila," he said, his voice soft. "I am," I said, squeezing his hand. "I didn't think I would be again, but I am." As we walked, I saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench up ahead. It was Leo. He was out on early parole. He looked thinner, grayer. The arrogant confidence was gone. replaced by a weary, hollowed out look. He saw us at the same moment, his eyes fixed on me, then on my hand in Michael's. For a second, I felt a jolt of the old fear. My first instinct was to turn, to walk away, to shield Sophie. But then I looked at Michael's calm face, at our daughters laughing in the distance. I was not the same woman who had trembled behind a locked door. I stopped walking. I didn't let go of Michael's hand. I just stood there and looked at Leo, my expression neutral, my posture strong. It wasn't a challenge. It was a statement, a boundary. He understood. He saw the new life I had built. He saw that there was no place for him in it, no cracks for his lies to seep through. He held my gaze for a long moment, a flicker of something regret, envy, in his eyes. Then, he slowly stood up and walked away in the opposite direction, a ghost from a life that was no longer mine. Michael squeezed my hand. "Are you okay?" "I am," I said again. And this time, the words felt like an anthem. I watched Leo's retreating back until he disappeared from view. I felt no anger, no sadness, just a quiet, profound sense of peace. "Mom, come on," Sophie yelled, waving for us to hurry up. "Chloe wants to show you the secret fort they found." I smiled, a real, unburdened smile that reached my eyes. "We're coming," I called back, hand in hand with Michael. I walked toward my daughter, toward our future. The past was finally where it belonged, behind me. The battle was over, and I had won, not by destroying him, but by rebuilding myself.